TGIF, happy Friday, and welcome to Women's Wrestling Talk, the number one women's wrestling network on the planet. And today, we're bringing you something a little different. You're used to solely Ring of Honor, but we've expanded what we're doing. We're bringing you the Thursday Night Roundup.
This is the Draw the Death Machine, Sami Callihan, and you are watching, you are listening, and you are supporting Women's Wrestling Talk. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Women's Wrestling Talk, the number one women's wrestling network on the planet.
TGIF, good people, happy Friday, and welcome to Women's Wrestling Talk, the number one women's wrestling network on the planet. I am Gerard Bonner, a.k.a. The Professor, a.k.a. Teflon G, a.k.a. GB, or whatever else you feel like calling me today. And we've got a really cool show lined up for you today, and I'm not kind of pumped. I'm actually very pumped about what we're going to talk about today as we delve into all things Thursday Night Wrestling, which includes Ring of Honor and TNA Impact. We're going to get into all of that and more, but I'm not by myself. If you've been following Women's Wrestling Talk for any length of time, you know who this is, and she's been on a slight sabbatical, but we're going to just throw her into the fire. She's back. The boss lady is in the building. TK, the real TK. How are you?
A slight sabbatical.
Yes.
I come back and, people's hair is purple and the Thursday Night Roundup. And I'm just, shout out to, first off, thank you, Professor, for holding it down. And then, thank you, Sid, for not burning it down. So I appreciate you guys.
There is still a whole organization here. All things are as you left them to some degree. And yeah. How are you doing?
I'm good. Life is lifing.
Yes.
But yeah, it's we're in a great place. Actually, maybe we'll make the announcement on Monday, but we have a new sponsor, which is very exciting. Exclusive sponsor, it's going to be sponsoring the whole network. So we'll make that announcement on Monday. But yeah, good things. Things are popping. Wrestling's a popping, and here we are with the Thursday Night Roundup.
Absolutely. And so for those who normally tune in during this time, it's normally the Ring of Honor post show. But as we started thinking about it, Thursday night is one of the few nights of the week where there are multiple wrestling shows happening. And so how can we really reflect all of that with the Thursday Night Roundup, which includes, of course, Ring of Honor and TNA Impact. And what a great week to start recapping TNA Impact, where Impact celebrated its 20th anniversary. Now, I want to help some people because based on when you came on to the wrestling train, you might really be confused with why TNA Impact is celebrating its 20th anniversary when TNA just celebrated a 20th anniversary last year. How does this all work? Well, originally the company was known as TNA. And Impact was actually the name of its first big show. When they first started, they started doing weekly pay-per-views. That was their version of television until they could land a TV deal. When they landed the TV deal, it was with this show called Impact. And that started back on June the 4th, 2004. So, of course, during the middle of all of that, several years ago, I remember specifically Mick Foley was like the GM, and he announced this decision that we're changing the name of the company from TNA to Impact. And so that's where the whole company began known as Impact for several years till the top of this year, where that changed and reverted back to TNA. So I hope that kind of helps everybody in terms of how we got to this particular point. But yes, Impact as a television show is celebrating 20 years. And if you start thinking about how significant this is, they brought it up on commentary, which, by the way, I think both of these shows, Impact and Ring of Honor, really have two fantastic commentary teams who do their jobs so amazingly well. Shout out to Tom Hannafin and Matthew Waywald, who are both WWE alumnus, who have done a great job really in crafting the stories behind Impact. And what's so interesting here, most people don't even think about this when we talk about TNA, but Impact is the third longest pro wrestling show in history, only behind Raw and SmackDown.
I know a lot of people don't give Impact its or TNA its flowers. Like I remember when there's kind of different transitions as far as TNA being my life, when actually wrestling was reintroduced to me as an adult through, and some people know, I think a lot of people know the story of how I got back into wrestling. Shout out to Xavier Woods. But I met him when he was at TNA in Toronto when I was working at a TV station. So that's how I was introduced to TNA. Didn't pay no mind, still, was doing the whole TV thing, went in and supported, we became friends, etc., etc. But then circle back now after Buzz, really becoming heavily involved and really appreciating the project when I was on Pop TV, if y'all remember that.
Right. Wow.
Like I loved it when I was like it was just so different from WWE, and it was also a bite-sized version. Yes. And I was really watching that. And then when they left Pop, it was like they were just trying to find their place. But kudos to them for never dying. Like, yes. I mean, it's like you want to take the mantra of life. Like, it's like just, it's like the little engine that could. And now you're seeing all the things that are happening, like the graphics and all the, it's just, they could have quit a long time ago. Because this entertainment thing is not easy.
No.
So, shout out to them for, keeping people employed and giving us a really great product and sustaining through it all. Cause I'm sure there have been many times where they could have been like, yeah, it's time to wrap it up. So, yeah, I think the only bigger things are happening, especially the fact that they've lasted for so long.
Yes.
I think there's some other things around the corner for us that we're going to be excited about.
Absolutely. And, I think that's one of the reasons why we're doing a show like this, is to constantly put more eyes on what TNA has done. If you think about it, 20 years for this show, 21 years for the company, that's 3 times longer than ECW and WCW, which WCW and ECW tend to get a lot of fanfare. But TNA has lasted 3 times as long as they have. And you start thinking about the number of stars that have rolled through TNA, we would not see what we're seeing right now in the WWE or in AEW without a TNA. So shout out to them, and shout out to this show, which introduced a lot of really, really great wrestling to the public. And one of the things that this show did expertly was have callbacks to some things that happened from the very first episode, but it was actually woven in through matches, as opposed to showing old clips, which, usually during Anniversary, you show, clips from the first show or what have you, but they wove it in to several matches, which I thought was pretty brilliant. And so the first match of the night, which, let me just start by saying, and I don't know whether we'll formally make the comparison or not, but both TNA Impact and Ring of Honor this week aired 6 matches, which is interesting given that TNA was pretty much double the size of Impact. Where Impact was double the size of the Ring of Honor show this week, which I thought that's super interesting, how they craft television in a way where both shows show 6 matches, but you get 2 completely different experiences, which we might analyze at some particular point. But first match, Khan versus Jake something. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with the TNA product, which let me also go ahead and mention, there are multiple ways to watch TNA. You can, of course, watch it on Access TV if you have Access TV in your particular area. I know that particular network does not always air amongst all cable systems, and you might have cut the cable cord. So if you have, you can now watch this show on TNA Plus, which is their streaming service. And I believe you can watch the weekly show for free on TNA Plus. So you don't even have to have a subscription to check that out. And now they're airing it on TNA Plus at the same time as Access TV, which is super cool. Now then, Khan versus Jake something. Now, if Khan looks familiar to you, if you've been following NXT over any length of time, he was originally in NXT as part of a really brutal tag team, which when they made their way over to the main roster, they didn't fare so well. But in NXT, they were violent, they were vicious, they were multiple-time NXT Tag Team Champions. Now he's over in TNA against Jake something, and it was a hard-hitting match to open up the show, which is pretty wild if you think about that. What if any thoughts that you have about these two big men kind of opening up the show for TNA?
I think it was a good start. It was I think that was the statement. And I don't know, and I definitely don't think this was the case, but I might be wrong. I don't think ROH, well, no, because they couldn't have done it because of how their taping is.
Right.
But I think for TNA, we've seen them show up on a regular basis when it's big things like this, like the 20th anniversary. It feels like they put in a little extra pizzazz in it, which is always great. So I think having this match showed two things. Obviously, if you're one, and we were talking about this before we started filming, if you are just about the wrestling, you don't care much about the storyline, whatever, you just want to see good wrestling, this is a great way to open up the show. If you're also like, okay, well, how is this, what is this going to lead to? This is also a good way to open up the show as well.
Yes.
Which, if you're on either side, now you're going to continue watching because you want to see what happens. So good decision along for that first match.
Absolutely. A great showing. And again, this is where we shout out the commentary team, because part of the job of great commentary is to cater to the regular fans of the product, as well as to prepare for brand new eyes that are watching this for the first time. So kind of the interesting story here is Khan used to be part of a group there in TNA that was led up by a guy named Cody Deaner. And they ended up breaking that group up when they just were not successful. Khan decided to go on his own. The other people that Cody had with him went on their own. But Cody Deaner is now trying to get back in the good graces of everybody. He also happens to be the cousin of Jake something. So as the cousin of Jake something, he's trying to advise Jake something. Khan has been telling Jake something, hey, listen, that's not the guy you want to listen to because he leads you nowhere. The match, ironically, after these two bulls really just kind of went back and forth, the match ends with Jake something hitting a finisher, and the finisher itself was quite the callback to some things that happened on the first episode of Impact, literally 20 years ago. So this is kind of cool. So what happens is Jake something hits this move called Into the Void, which looks an awful lot like the Black Hole Slam. Well, it was the Black Hole Slam, and that was the finisher that was used by Abyss. Abyss, a major name in TNA, part of the TNA Hall of Fame. And Abyss was actually in the very first match for Impact back in 2004, where he defeated Shark Boy. So a really cool callback to something, again, that was the first match in the 20th anniversary. The first match 20 years ago and the first match in the 20th anniversary. To your point, TK, a lot of intentionality put into what we saw here from this opening match here for the 20th anniversary of Impact. Now, following this, Jake something gets the win. Khan gets mad. He comes out. He attacks Jake something. And then coming out is Eric Young, who is a TNA original, who comes to kind of save the day and give a really cool speech to tell people, hey, we're here to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Impact, which I think, again, a great callback. Very, very smart to do, because what can happen sometimes, and we've seen this on anniversary shows for Raw specifically, where they bring back all of these old legends. And while that's cool, they do that often at the expense of the stories that are currently being built.
Right.
But TNA did not do that with this episode, and I thought that was pretty awesome. Any other thoughts on that?
No, I wonder if how they do it is, I think of remember that show This Is Us?
Yes. Oh, yes.
And I remember the producers were saying and the writers were saying they already knew the ending and they worked
Yes.
backwards. So I wonder if it's the same thing where it's like, this day is coming and you work backwards as far as how you're going to weave it all in to get to that day. Like, okay, you want these people to show up who are not necessarily part of, the company, but were part of the company. And how do you kind of weave it all together? Like, I'm really curious as far as, I think because of like my producer, that's, what I do. I'm really curious as far as the behind the scenes stuff, because oftentimes what we see in front of the camera, there's a whole ish storm happening that, we're never privy to. And that's the stuff that makes me even more curious. Like, how did we get to that point? So kudos to the person whoever made it work.
And I think what's even more interesting about that, and I hope this is not, destroying anything for anybody, but what's so different also about the Impact show and the Ring of Honor show is they're both taped, as opposed to most of the live wrestling that we see, from Raw, SmackDown, NXT, Dynamite, and Collision. And so when you have a taped show, there can be some challenges in there, particularly if you have taped it a couple of weeks ahead of when it actually airs. I know one of my fears, I remember, several years back, I used to go to some tapings for BET where they would literally tape a particular show, the entire season of it in 2 weekends. And what always made me nervous was, okay, so what happens if one of these performers ends up in a car accident or something, or randomly passes away? Like, not to be morbid, but things happen to people in the entertainment space. And when the show is taped too far in advance, it can make it hard to explain certain things if breaking news happens. And, and so this show was interesting because it was very clear that when it was taped, nobody involved knew where TNA would literally be right now. Like, nobody there knew about the potential NXT TNA partnership. Nobody knew Jordynne Grace was showing up. And so, since you mentioned producer, now we'll really take people behind and tell them this is the cool thing about taping a show and making it feel live is the ability to go back and overdub certain things, the ability to go back. And again, this is where commentary really wins. They can, say things that will make you think, oh, wow, clearly this has to be happening Thursday, because there's no way they taped this 2-3 weeks ago and knew that was going to happen. So again, just a brilliant work of art that takes place in creating these kinds of shows and making them feel like they are literally brand new. So shout out to TNA for the hard work that they've been doing with Impact. Now, they also had a couple of backstage interviews that happened. One of them was involving Frankie Kazarian, who is involved in the main event. And in there, they used this to strike up a deal where he struck up a deal with the system where if he was able to defeat Nick Nemeth in the main event, then he would get a world title shot against Moose. So they agreed to that. Then also TNA did a really good job of kind of circling back and telling some additional stories. And one of those was going back to 3 weeks ago. A weird, I just never saw this potentially happening, but PCO, who is kind of like his own zombie / Frankenstein experiment, apparently has a heart, and that heart has a love interest in Steph DeLander. And so kind of watching him give her a black rose and her not figuring out what to do with it is wild. And so it was a pretty entertaining backstage segment involving her, Gia Miller, Zaya Brookside, who's saying, "Hey, give PCO a chance," which it's,
Like,
one
wait,
thing
what?
is, yeah, it's crazy, right? Like TNA historically has done a good job again with giving us great wrestling action and some stories that almost seem so bizarre that it's just like we got to go with it. Like we're just gonna go with it, you know?
Yeah, but sometimes, I mean, it almost might resemble real life a little bit
Oh, for
because
sure.
it's not, sometimes you get the beautiful guy and the beautiful girl together, but it's oftentimes where it's, either the girl's not so cute and the guy is handsomer or vice versa. And it's just, life happens and you're like, all right, well, here we are. So I think it's more oftentimes like that versus the Disney. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
feel like children should watch TNA instead of Disney because
Oh,
that's a
that's
little bit
funny.
more real life. Than it's a little bit more realistic where it's not always gonna be the prince is not always gonna look like the prince.
Mhm.
So maybe definitely take Zaya's advice and just go for it.
That is
Which
absolutely
I'm completely
hilarious.
joking, y'all. Just
Well,
relax.
it wouldn't be a show with TK without a slightly wild analogy. You know, I mean,
Hey,
hey, so from there we get to our next bit of action, which involves the return of Giselle Shaw. Giselle Shaw has been off of Impact Television for about 3 or 4 months now, and over the last couple of weeks, they've really been spelling out this story involving her, even having um oh, her name is escaping me, and I'm ashamed that her name is escaping me. But
so
I'm sorry.
Gail.
Yes, Gail Kim, who really found Giselle Shaw kind of at this retreat or what have you, really trying to convince her that, hey, you don't need all these other people for outside interference. You can do this on your own. So Giselle Shaw returns and takes on Shaza McKenzie, which for those who aren't familiar with Shaza McKenzie, she's from Australia, but she's downright amazing. She's done a lot of work on the independent circuit, certainly has appeared in TNA before. And these two gave us a really solid match, a big win for Giselle Shaw in her return. Any thoughts on this particular matchup?
Shout out to Shaza. We had her on the show, I think either during the pandemic or right before the pandemic. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, she's one of the women who opened up the Aussie door for women.
Yeah, absolutely.
So shout out to her, because if you look at we have a whole bunch of Aussies on WoW, obviously on NXT, etc.
Mhm.
And obviously TN. So it's just kind of like it seems like, and again, Bosa, when you watch this, let me know. But it seems like she is like the starting point as far as all these, the Aussie invasion.
Mhm.
So I love seeing her on any type of television. And yeah, I hope she's gonna get, a permanent shot somewhere. But
Yeah.
this was a great match.
It really was a great match and wasn't super predictable in terms of where it could go, simply because of Shazi and her background and what could happen in this return match with Giselle Shaw. But Giselle Shaw gets the win, looking really crisp in terms of what she's doing in the ring, and it's really exciting for her. So congratulations. Now, following that, there was a vignette in the back, which, quite frankly, you might need some help decoding, which, again, in this era of the QR codes and the like, really the spooky aspect of pro wrestling, probably introduced by WWE in the 90s with some crazy things like Papa Shango and The Undertaker, but absolutely perfected, I think, by TNA and all that they've done with the Undead Realm and all of those kinds of things. And so we got to see another one of those moments involving Havoc and Rosemary. And I won't fully try to decode what they were saying, I'll just know that it seems like they're very much back in their undead element because they had a period where they had shed that skin and they were just being themselves. But I guess being undead works a bit better for them. So, yeah. That was that. And then from there was another backstage interaction involving Mike Santana and Steve Macklin, which will lead to a tag match for them at Against All Odds against the Rascals, which I think should be very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We move now to our third match, which was a tag team match involving Mustafa Ali and Campaign Singh, which let me just say, I don't know what people will say about this, but that name alone is hilarious to me. Campaign Singh. Now that happens, of course, because Mustafa Ali is on this whole campaign of sorts, where he's kind of acting as someone running for office, making wrestling in the X Division and all these places great again. He's the current X Division champion. Campaign Singh is in his crew. They took on they took on Mike Bailey and Trent Seven of Speedball Mountain. And this is kind of a precursor to the upcoming X Division title match between Mustafa Ali and Trent Seven, which will happen at Against All Odds. A wild tag team match that saw Speedball Mountain get the win. What were your thoughts on this one?
I was kind of surprised. I do like what Mustafa Ali is doing. It's oftentimes like we're not not inventing anything new, but the people who can reinvent the wheel and make it really interesting and also have a play on it as far as life wise, because obviously, you know, a lot of us, if you're not even in politics, you're seeing a lot of it happen. I just like, it was just, you know, again, the producer of me is like, who came up with this idea, and you know, how did you bottle it and make it what it is? So I love what he's doing. I mean, obviously we saw when he left WWE and how he essentially rebranded himself.
Mm-hmm.
And like you were saying, campaigns. There's so many other things that I want to do more of a deep dive in, because I have a feeling that there's another layer to that,
Sure.
geographically. So yeah, I'm for it, but we'll see. Even though he took the L on this one, we'll see what's going to happen, because I think it's beneficial for TNA for him to maintain it for a little bit longer.
Absolutely. And again, really exciting. And to your point, this idea of this campaign situation for Mustafa Ali is an idea he actually had back in WWE. He pitched the idea. It seemed like there was a brief moment in NXT where they were going to let him run with it. And then they just kind of took it away and it got quiet. And so this is kind of something he's always wanted to do. And now having the freedom to do it, I think is really, really awesome. So shout out to him, which I think is amazing. Again, the big win there goes to Speedball Mountain. And what I thought was also interesting during this match was how there was a moment where Mustafa Ali had a chance to kind of come in and save Campaign Singh and prevent them losing. And he thought twice about it and didn't, and just kind of looked and let Campaign Singh take the pin, which maybe that'll cause some, animosity there, or maybe it's just him going, nah, you're going to eat this because you're part of this team. And, it tends to go that way sometimes in some of these spaces. So pretty wild to see that happening there. But a big win again for Speedball Mountain. And again, this is a great precursor to that match that happens, strangely enough, a week from tonight for Against All Odds for the X Division Championship between Mustafa Ali and Trent Seven, which I think is going to be a really, really good match. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that. So that's a look at that. We still have some more ground to cover here with TNA, but we want you to go and buy some merch.
Hey, yo, you. Yeah, you that's watching this. You sitting on the couch staring at the screen not knowing what you want to do, like this is an online college. Are you tired of wearing shirts that make you look like an extra stuck in catering? Do you want to step your wrestling swag game up to the next level? Then Women's Wrestling Talk has got you covered. Like literally. Are you for life in pink or black and white? Or maybe you're the EST and people need to respect you accordingly. Want to put some pride in your stride and show off the muscle in your hustle? Then make sure you check out the WWT store. Not now, but right now. Alright? What you waiting for? Head to wwtalkpodstore.com and don't make me fight you. Shit.
Professor, I'm sure, is dealing with little professor at the moment. But that leads us into our next match, which is Jordynne Grace and Allison Kay, which leads me to, and Marty Bell in the back there, which leads me to believe, oh, there you are. Were you dealing with little professor?
Yeah, I had to handle something real quick, but he's all good. He's all good. No worries. So following that, which by the way, go buy some merch, guys. wwtalkpodstore.com. So following what we just saw, now we get into things being very, very interesting. There are 2 title matches happening here tonight. And the first of which being the Impact Knockouts World Championship as Jordynne Grace takes on Allison Kay.
Mm-hmm.
We're probably going to park here for a little bit because this is one of the spaces, and I will readily admit that for both this show and Ring of Honor, if I'm putting the shows together, I'm probably structuring the placement of some of these matches a little bit differently. And I arguably would have had this serve as the main event in light of all that's going on with Jordynne Grace, all of the attention she's getting right now. It's kind of wild to think that right now a woman is the face of TNA. It's crazy, but it is accurate. The whole world is talking about Jordynne Grace. And I think that, again, the commentary team did a great job of just trying to ensure that if you did not watch NXT, that you were familiar with what has happened with Jordynne Grace and what's coming up next for her and how big of a match this is with Allison Kay. And what I found to be interesting, and there's a lot, but if you'll remember, just a couple of weeks ago, we found ourselves in a conversation in Ring of Honor surrounding Allison Kay, where she had a match. I think it was either against Athena or Billy Starks. It was against one of their champions. And, you know, we just kind of sat back going, how is this a good way for Allison Kay to be used? Right. Somehow in TNA, this feels an awful lot different. Perhaps it was because in Ring of Honor, it was a proving ground match versus this being a match where the world title was on the line. Perhaps it was kind of this real understanding of who Allison Kay and Marty Bell as the Hex are in TNA versus Ring of Honor. But I want to get your thoughts on the use of Allison Kay on this 20th anniversary show and the match itself.
Well, I mean, with Allison Kay has been in and around TNA and Impact for on and off for years as Sienna. I remember there's one time somebody did an article and they wrote about Sienna and Allison Kay as if they were two people. But she's now like solidified Allison Kay, AK, and Marty Bell and their group as the Hex. By the way, we did an interview with them and how they got together. It was really interesting as well. I feel like TNA storyline wise gets it. I mean, you can't, whether you are, some of their stories are out there, but again, it's not about, you know, being compared to WWE. TNA has done a really good job as far as it being in its own lane. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. You just, you know, there's so much more there's so much wrestling to watch. So I think, even though ROH, in particular, the commentary team really does a great job in explaining who people are, TNA has that history, and ROH does too. It's just that they're missing the ball. I don't think that's the commentary team's part. It's like you need commentary, and you also need the producing and how they're structuring the matches and who goes where. Yeah. So the commentary team can only do so much for ROH. However, Impact is really good at weaving all those things together.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense. And then as far as I feel like, oh no, it was Impact is the men's division that was working with AEW. I feel like kind of AEW dropped the ball with this one.
Yeah.
I feel like they may have had an opportunity, and they just saw the men's, because I think they also had to deal with New Japan, because Thunder Rosa was coming in through New was it NWA?
It was NWA for a bit.
NWA.
Yeah.
So the
Mm-hmm.
women's side, NWA is partnering with AEW, and then Impact was partnering with AEW. But I feel like they dropped the ball with this one, and whoever made this happen, and obviously we saw the Royal Rumble with Jordynne Grace and stuff like that. Whoever made this happen, like the timing was absolutely perfect. However, I mean, we'll talk about WWE another time. You already know who I was going to talk about. But yeah, I mean, it's great to see all those faces and to be acknowledged. So long to bring it all back around. All parties have been part of TNA and Impact, and it's great to see this. However, because I believe, and quote me if I'm wrong, the Hex is not like an official, they're not officially part of TNA. This is kind of and we were talking about this off air, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this for in particular with ROH. ROH does this a lot more often. It's just kind of one of those things when you bring enhancement talent, and AK is definitely not that. But when you bring somebody who's unsigned, it's just kind of like you already know what's going to play out. So that's kind of one of those things where it's just kind of like, okay, what are we doing here?
Well, and it's interesting because credit to them, Marty Bell wrestled last week with Allison Kay by her side. So the good thing is they aren't strangers to the TNA audience, and what they have done has been proven. And again, it's also interesting because the X Division champion right now, Mustafa Ali, isn't signed to TNA, but he's getting a lot of shine. And so it's just interesting to see how they'll use that. But I definitely feel like the way Allison Kay and Marty Bell are being presented is much, much different and much more reflective of who they are in the wrestling industry, and I think that's great. I think one of the other cool things that happened in this match is the commentary team made it a point to talk about the history that Roxanne Perez has in TNA, that she's not a stranger, and they use it as a great way to push TNA Plus, so you could go back and watch what she's done. I thought Allison Kay is a great test for Jordynne Grace leading up to Battleground this weekend. A much stronger opponent, a much more experienced opponent, to really see how Jordynne will handle that. And if she's able to push past that, obviously Roxanne, a smaller opponent, Jordynne certainly would seem like perhaps physically having the advantage in that particular match. A lot of interference here for Marty Bell, and a lot of moments where it felt like Allison Kay could walk out as the Impact Knockouts champion, but Jordynne Grace wasn't going to have it. Jordynne Grace hit this power bomb that was just like, eek. And then followed that, of course, with the Juggernaut Driver getting the win. Jordynne Grace retains the Impact Knockouts Women's Championship and now goes on to Battleground, where I can't say enough about what this match is going to do. I've been saying it since day one, and everywhere I say it, I'm not really worried whether or not people agree or not, but trust me, this Sunday night, when Battleground is over, the image you will see is Jordynne Grace holding 2 championships in her hand as the TNA Knockouts champion and the NXT Women's Champion.
Really?
It's absolutely going to happen.
Wow.
It's going to it's literally like when they announced it last week, I said, "Oh my God, this is happening. This is absolutely happening." It is happening. It's happening.
So this might go off the rails, and I know timing wise we're there, but I mean, I think I think when you think of the two competitors, Jordynne, well, they might have, because Roxanne's been wrestling since she was a teenager.
Mhm.
But when you look at the two competitors as far as just power wise, right? I definitely see, like, you know, if you take out the politics, I definitely see Jordynne winning.
Mhm.
However, how does this work? Again, the business person, the producer in me just wants to know the logistics of it. Contract wise, like I want to be in that room. Like, yes, I want to see the visual of it, but like, how is this working? Like, did TNA sign a deal with WWE, or is this something that Jordynne, like it's more brokered with Jordynne? Is this a short span thing? Is this going to be a transition from her, you know, from TNA to Impact, as far as she dropped? There's so many questions surrounding the back end of it, that it's just kind of like, you know, obviously it was already a big thing, the fact that she showed up at Royal Rumble and she's not a WWE alum. It wasn't like a WWE alum who left
Mhm.
and is at TNA, and now
Mhm.
it's not that, like when Mickie James came. So it's kind of like, how is this all working? And if that does happen, it'd be really great for TNA, but you know, how does this benefit NXT? You know what I'm saying?
Let me answer all of your questions. First,
Okay.
one of the you're so funny. One of the things that I noticed back at the top of the year, and I don't know how many people remember this, but the second I saw this, I was like, something's up. When TNA announced, obviously, that they were moving back from Impact to TNA as the name of their brand,
Mhm.
then coming into the top of the year, they announced TNA Plus. And one of the
Mhm.
big things about TNA Plus is that it was powered by this little streaming company called Endeavor.
Mhm.
And when I
Yep.
saw that, I went, oh, we got a thing here. Now, for those who
Yep.
don't know, Endeavor is the parent company of WWE. We've never had to say something like that before, but that's just kind of the way it is. So when you have one parent with multiple companies under it, at some point, they're going to work together. Didn't take long because uh, TNA had their hard to kill situation mid-January.
Mm.
Trinity loses the championship to Jordynne Grace. We get the Royal Rumble. Trinity shows up at the Royal Rumble, and like 2 or 3 people after her, it's Jordynne Grace.
Mhm.
Now what happened, which I thought was so smart, was, you know, Jordynne had a great showing, and then we really saw nothing else of this kind of crossover. TNA just kept building its own empire. NXT and WWE kept doing their thing. And here we sit in this moment now. What I think has happened is a couple of things. For one, we've heard it said that Triple H and Shawn Michaels are definitely willing to work with other companies. We've
Mhm.
already seen it happen with them sending people to All Japan at the top of the year. Last year, sending people to Pro Wrestling Noah. This is a moment that I think really, really works. And it only effectively works if Jordynne Grace wins this championship. Let me explain
Mm.
why. We remember, you know, all of this talk about the forbidden door. The forbidden door, the problem with every AEW partnership is that it's always been one-sided.
Right.
Whenever AEW is partnered with New Japan, AEW always wins. Whenever they partner with Impact, they always win. There was never a moment where someone from Impact actually gets to win this thing.
Right.
So, what happens now in this world? In this world, you get a TNA Impact star doing something that no one else in history has ever done, and that is legitimately won a WWE championship while not being contracted there. Now more eyes go on to Impact because it's like, holy cow. And one thing to remember is next week at Against All Odds, Jordynne Grace has already acknowledged that she's going to have an open challenge for her Knockouts championship. Open challenge sounds an awful lot like what we see in WWE.
Mhm.
Impact TNA also did something that was interesting. They started renaming their events not pay-per-views, but premium live events. So
Mm.
the language is being used as well. I've heard people talk about, well, is WWE going to buy TNA? They don't have to. They're all under the same parent company. And at the
Mhm.
end of the day, the parent company wants to make sure that everybody's making money, not just one crew. So if you have a space where this Against All Odds pay-per-view or premium live event streams on TNA Plus next week, and Jordynne Grace is the NXT Women's Champion, how many eyes do you think are going over to TNA Plus?
Right.
A ton.
Same,
You know?
same amount when like Trin signed with TNA. It was a smart move for Impact to sign her for 6 months.
So I think what's happening here is everybody's understanding the kind of business that can be done. Plus, this era of WWE wants to make legitimate history. How do you do that? You do what everybody's always wanted to see WWE do: work with other companies.
Mhm.
And it only works if you're acting as though they're both on level playing fields. And the NXT and TNA women's divisions, the two best women's divisions in pro wrestling, that's not even up for discussion. So the fact that those two are where this partnership starts, that's a massive statement in and of itself. So I think for the partnership to effectively work, she's got to win. She's got to win. I even would say the placement of this happening in Vegas is strategic. Vegas has already housed 2 premium live events for TNA this year alone.
Vegas is pretty standard for TNA. They used to be in Sam's Club. Now they're at the Palms. But what I did notice with NXT, which is maybe because I don't have that much faith in humanity, but when I was watching NXT, seeing the crossover from UFC and MMA fighters woven into NXT and the pay-per-view, and obviously where it's being taped. And shout out to WWE. The mayor will be at Battleground, so we'll see how Vice City and all that would be. However, seeing all that crossover is great. It's almost, and here comes another bad analogy. It's almost like you have the super group get together, right? But eventually it implodes. So, and it might be 10, 20 years from now. Like, it's not going to happen now, because now we're in the honeymoon period. Like, Endeavor is happy, everybody's starting to make money, which is great, because no business wants to spend money. They want to make money and always be in the green, which is a great thing. I'm just kind of looking towards the future as far as is this kumbaya going to last forever? And we might be, again, this is 20, 30 years down the line, but I'm just kind of like,
well, I think one of the things to also consider is, it is not a requirement that everything becomes TNA versus NXT or TNA versus WWE. Right. They're still going to build their separate products. And so because they're building their separate products, because they have separate offerings, they can strategically decide when it makes sense to work together, and so I think that's the case. So David, for those who are listening, he says, Jordynne Grace can lose. Perez gloats Tuesday and shows up at Against All Odds to try to take Grace's title, and then Grace wins. I'm going to respectfully disagree, because the thing is, if Roxanne Perez wins, first, she can't win clean. But secondly, her winning actually almost diminishes this whole TNA situation, because you have this extremely powerful woman that walks into your company. If she loses, regardless of how she loses, then we don't take any of this TNA situation seriously. We don't, because there's no threat. There's no threat. The threat has to come where the powerhouse, and in this case, this is what's so interesting about this. The physical powerhouse here is Jordynne Grace, but the overall juggernaut is NXT and WWE. So WWE has to at some point look weak for anybody to believe, oh my God, this partnership can work, because now TNA is being put on the same playing field as WWE because your women's champion just beat ours. And again, if Jordynne Grace doesn't win, we're just revisiting the AEW Impact partnership again.
True, and that didn't go.
And that didn't work at all. So I think there are so many reasons why Jordynne Grace wins this match and becomes TNA or NXT Women's Champion. I mean, it's just, we use the phrase about what's good for business and things like that. Mm-hmm. Trust me and then here's the other thing. One of the things that right now almost all wrestling measures success by is social media impact. Mm-hmm. Think about how big things have been for Jordynne Grace and NXT in terms of social media. This place is going to go nuts Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for Jordynne Grace to win the TNA or the NXT Women's Championship. Mm-hmm. It's going to go crazy. It's going to go crazy. So, and then it will, I think, also open the door for others from TNA to walk through. You know, we've already seen it teased on the socials about Joe Hendry, New Day, Drew McIntyre, all of these people. There are a lot of ways for this to work. Let me see. David made another comment again. I want to make sure we get to it. I think the AEW TNA partnership worked for TNA. They came out of it with not one, but two new main eventers, Josh Alexander and Moose. I disagree. The main event of Josh Alexander and Moose happened not because of AEW. If you remember, Moose during that pandemic era, his contract was up for renewal. And right before his contract was up for renewal, he fought for the AEW world title in Jacksonville against Kenny Omega and lost. And so, you know, he ends up obviously re-signing, but he doesn't win a world championship and doesn't become a main eventer until they stop this whole AEW TNA partnership. Josh Alexander, again, becomes a main eventer by beating Moose, but none of that impacted that Impact AEW partnership. So, and that's one of the reasons why when you look at it, you know, historically, it doesn't ring well. The only time that anything from Impact actually won was when Christian Cage won the Impact World title from Kenny Omega in the debut episode of Rampage. But at that point, Christian was an AEW contracted star. So again, he just had TNA roots. It wasn't ever a TNA person who was signed to that company who came into AEW and got the win. So I think that's another reason why this is important. And I think everybody would make the argument that the TNA WWE partnership is a bigger deal than the TNA AEW partnership. And if this win happens, it's a wrap. It's a wrap. So I'm misremembering. Is that right? Okay. Anybody who knows me, I know I like a good challenge. So bring me dates and times. We can do this. I got no problem with that at all. But let's do this because I don't even know how we're gonna get to Ring of Honor, but we will. We also got to see a new segment. Again, another twisted one. Sami Callihan with Death Machine TV, which again, this is really the specialty of TNA. Their specialty is kind of doing this dark, crazy, wild, otherworldly kind of thing. And so I'll be interested to see where Death Machine TV goes. It does look like, though, this is leading to a challenge between Sami Callihan and Jonathan Gresham, which I think has potential to be very, very wild. Now, there was a second title match that happened here on Impact. Laredo Kid and AJ Francis for the Digital Media Championship. AJ Francis has been very, very busy. Just last weekend over in MLW in Atlanta, fighting Alex Kane in that Beaumaye Fight Club match, which was crazy. And before this match even got underway, I thought to myself, it's about time for AJ Francis to win a championship.
Oh, Dylan, you know what to do.
It's about time, it's about time for him to win a championship. And then when you see these two physically against each other, AJ Francis, certainly much taller, much bigger than Laredo Kid, and the like. And at the end of it all, we got a new champion. A new digital media champion is crowned. AJ Francis winning the digital media championship. To you, how much sense does this make, having him as a digital media champion for TNA?
I mean, we've seen how he had success at WWE, but with the changes and everything like that, and then additional changes which resulted in him being let go. How his blueprint for anybody who, I mean, you have a certain population, a certain ilk of people, social media wise, they get it, right? A lot of people are coming from college, etc. They get it, but there are still people who they don't want to be on social media like that all the time, right? But how AJ managed to do that after leaving, and now he's everywhere, like that's the blueprint right there. Right. Obviously, you need the personality and the gimmick and all the other things, but that's the blueprint right there. You don't necessarily, it doesn't have to necessarily be WWE or nothing. So it's just one of those things where it's just kind of like it makes sense, and it's well deserved. So I think it was only a matter of time. So perfect for him.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he is, when you start thinking about digital media in wrestling right now, he is the guy for that. Like, he just is. What he has done has been amazing. And, he now can like put his name in the hat with a Matt Cardona and with several others who Cardona has held that championship, but several others who have figured out how to master the art of digital media and social media to their advantage. And I definitely think that he has done that. And thank you, David. I appreciate that, man. Like, definitely, we're working hard on this one. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. So yeah, shout out to all that AJ Francis is doing, the new digital media champion. But with two championships on the line, that was not the main event. Leading into the main event, we started getting a look at what this Against All Odds card will look like. It features Moose defending the world championship against Matt Hardy. The System defending the tag titles against Nick and Ryan Nemeth. And then Mustafa Ali defending the X Division championship against Trent Seven. And as we mentioned before, the open challenge for the TNA Knockouts World Championship, Jordynne Grace. I can't wait to see who could potentially answer this challenge. And maybe next week we can talk potentially about who would be the one to answer the challenge. And after the fallout of whatever happens at Battleground, that may or may not become clearer. To the main event we go. Frankie Kazarian against Nick Nemeth. Again, another callback to the debut episode of Impact, where Frankie Kazarian was one of the last images of that initial Impact episode, where he was the X Division champion, standing out to be challenged by AJ Styles. Now Frankie Kazarian, with a potential world championship opportunity on the line, battles Nick Nemeth. Nick Nemeth gets the win, but then it just goes crazy. It goes crazy. The System hits the ring. They're attacking Nick Nemeth. Nick Nemeth's brother shows up. He gets attacked. Joe Hendry shows up. He gets attacked. And by the end of it, this is the go-home image where the System is standing tall, having laid out Joe Hendry, having laid out the Nemeth brothers. What do you think of this as the final image there, for the most part, of Impact's 20th anniversary?
I mean, I was gonna say something, but I had a moment that's like, I don't think that's HR. That will be HR great. But no, I think it's I think it's a great. I mean, the show was great. Like we said in the beginning, it feels like TNA takes really a good amount of time in really planning this out.
Mhm.
And obviously there's always, no matter what, no matter how perfect a show is, there's always a hiccup. There's always a hiccup. So despite all of that, it was a great show, and this would be a great image leading up to the PLE next week. So yeah, I'm for it. And I think too, with the timing of everything, with Jordynne and this weekend being this weekend, then leading into that pay-per-view next weekend, it's a really great time. Again, that's not something that would just happen. This is something that's been in the plans for quite some time. And so me, the producer in me, is just like, well, when did this start? Who pitched this idea? And how did they make this all come together? Because that's what I'm even more curious about.
Yeah, it's definitely something. And after this image, all of a sudden, Matt Hardy appears on our television. Long story short, next week, inviting the system to the Hardy compound, which a trip to the Hardy compound is never a good thing if your last name isn't Hardy. So we'll see what happens with that next week. Again, a reminder, you can check out TNA's Impact on TNA Plus. And you can check that out, which, by the way, I also think the timing of this is interesting. They're offering some really cool specials right now in terms of membership for TNA. Their normal $9.99 monthly one is now down to $4.99 a month. And then they have a yearly thing that they're doing like 50% off on or something. So it's definitely worth checking out what's going on with them. Moving quickly over to Ring of Honor. It's episode 67, which we knew from last week coming into it would be featuring a world television title match between Kyle Fletcher and Dalton Castle, which we'll talk about that for sure. But the night kicks off with Queen Aminata in action, taking on someone near and dear to us, that being Maserati. There's some interesting history here that I don't think that the Ring of Honor commentators were either privy to or probably allowed to talk about. But let's just say this: Queen Aminata and Maserati both have strong connections to All Caribbean Wrestling. Queen Aminata, the first All Caribbean Wrestling women's champion, and held that title until the month of May, where at their big event in May, a certain Maserati would cash in her golden ticket to become the new All Caribbean women's champion. So there's history between Queen Aminata and Maserati that they probably could not go into here for Ring of Honor because, A, you don't want to make All Caribbean look weird, Maserati look weird, but these two certainly have great history with each other, and they gave us a really solid match. What were your thoughts on this one?
I actually totally forgot about that. So shout out to All Caribbean Wrestling with that. Queen Aminata,
it's special.
It's kind of like, prepare for another bad analogy. It's kind of like how Professor will like pray for you and cuss you at the same time. Queen Aminata, like, it's almost like you don't know you're getting kicked in the face. I can't really explain it. But she did 2 kicks to the face to Maserati, and it was just so, and then it was almost like she didn't need to take a breath. Like, this was just something she does on a regular basis, and it was effortless. That's the word. It was effortless. And I was just kind of like, that's very dangerous. If she is kicking people in the face and not even breaking a sweat, and those kicks are deadly, it's not one of those, that's scary and also great. And I don't want this to end up being a show where we compare TNA and ROH. However, in this particular case, because this is the first time we're doing it, in this particular case, it's one of those things that's the difference where, I mean, eventually we're going to see Athena lose, but then where do all the chips lie? And then who is the person in charge of all these chips? And where is, again, the producer in me wants to go to that back room and say, okay, this is this is where all the plans is. All right, cool, I get it. Where we see with TNA, there's kind of some type of clear path, whether if we guess it wrong or right, there's a direction. Whereas sometimes with ROH, it's just kind of like what's happening, especially with such a robust women's locker room. Like, shout out to Maserati. I think she's amazing. I definitely, think she should be signed somewhere. We see her a lot in All Caribbean Wrestling. However, where with this match and getting so many kicks to the head, where like it's eventually like, are they prolonging this to eventually get to Athena? And if that's the case, again, we have so many women in the locker room that I feel like you can still have a meaningful story and not, bring in other folks who are not necessarily signed. So that's kind of one of those things, because it's like, I knew that Maz was not going to win, especially with how strong Queen Aminata has been looking in ROH. So it looks like she's getting primed to take over or take the title from Athena. Again, when and how is the storyline going to play out?
I think this is one of those cases where, the comparison between AEW and Ring of Honor is kind of wild, because AEW is seemingly known for, they throw two names out there and next week they're fighting with no buildup, with no story. Ring of Honor is the polar opposite, but the challenge is the length of time before we get the payoff is so long,
right,
that it's like, what else can you do to keep this interesting? And to your point, I think if they were using regular members of the Ring of Honor roster, it would get to be more interesting, because we know she's fighting a competitor that has been there for a while, someone who has already stacked up several wins. So now we see, okay, you fighting to, I guess, officially be named number one contender, because there has not, much like there's a ranking system in AEW, there isn't much of a ranking system in Ring of Honor, at least not one that's publicized. So we are only making assumptions based on how connected these two competitors are, that, oh, okay, this is clearly where she's going. It seems, and this is the other thing that's challenging, their next big event is Death Before Dishonor, which is toward the end of July. So here we are at the beginning of June. We've got another 6-7 weeks before we get there. I don't know what else needs to happen between Aminata and Athena, Red Velvet and Billy Starks, for us to go, okay, let's finally give us the match.
Right.
And
And
so
maybe this is where that happens. You throw in enhancement talents as a placeholder. But again, it's kind of one of those things like you like, I'm happy to see her on the screen. However, it's kind of one of those another bad analogy. You're in a relationship and you already know where the relationship is going, but one party is dragging their feet, but they're dragging their feet for like stupid reasons. Like, bro, we already know we're getting married. Like, let's wrap this up. Let's buy the house and call it a day. So so it's just kind of
let's not work to get money, and let's not get our credit clean. Let's not do any of that. Just go
wrap it up, and then we can do it together. Why,
we need a separate show called Bad Analogies. That's what we need. We need a completely separate show for bad analogies, and so we could. Oh my gosh!
You like you, I like you, you like me. Like, we're in this for the long haul. Let's just wrap this up. You got better crack. We'll work on it. Let's go.
That is so hilarious. Oh my gosh. Listen, anybody out in the chat who thinks we just need to do a whole separate show called Bad Analogies, please say something in the chat, because I need to know I'm not alone on this. This is personally, I think this is more of the case. I mean, with Queen Aminata, I think there's one thing. I think the other side of this is, I think if we're going to present someone like Maserati, What I think is unfortunate about the enhancement talent that was used on this episode is that in some region, they are all stars. They're all
Right.
stars in certain regions, but you have to be in that region to know. So, like, for me, having exposure to Maserati, you go, oh my God, this is a marquee match. But to the average person, it's just another person coming to fill a slot
Right.
to get beat up by Queen Aminata.
Right.
And in this particular case, this week we didn't see Athena, so outside of Queen Aminata, actually saying, Athena, I'm coming for you, you wouldn't know. So
Right.
anyway,
Unless you
shout out.
have, like, if it's a 6-week period, then you use Maz in different matches. Like 1 week she might be with Queen Aminata, 1 week might be Red Velvet, etc., etc. You use her for that 6-week period, so at least we
Yeah.
get used to seeing her face. Like, she might not
Right.
be an official, signed to ROH, but for that 6-week period, that enhancement talent you use throughout the 6 weeks, so they become woven into the story. Like, that would be the alternative versus seeing somebody new every week.
It's such a tricky line because I'm thinking on one hand, it obviously makes a ton of sense to utilize the people that are already signed to your roster. The flip side, though, is when do new people get the opportunity?
Right.
So it's a weird balancing act, which obviously we won't solve today. But shout out to Maserati. It's great to see her in that national space. From there, we finally get to see Marina Shafir in action, where we've seen, I think, some really, really solid backstage vignettes and stories being told about her. And then from there, we go into her getting this matchup. And this match was against a young lady named Amira and Marina. And again, this is another case of someone being really great in a particular region, but if you're not in that region, you don't know. Marina Shafir made short work of her. And I think the bigger story, at least being told here, is that, okay, we're going to build Shafir up again and see what she can become here in Ring of Honor, which I think that could be interesting for sure. By the way, there was and I wrote this down, going back to Queen Aminata, she made a statement that I thought was really cool. After that kick you talked about, she looked at the camera and she said, "That's what I do." And I said to myself, that's an ode to Mark Henry. And I'm like, this is cool. Henry considers her one of his girls. He regularly says, I did not discover her, but she regularly listens to my advice and things of that nature. So I thought, how cool is it that a statement's being made about Mark Henry on Ring of Honor in a very, very subtle way. So shout out to them for doing that. So let's get to this one. Let's get to this one. The World Television Championship. Kyle Fletcher defends against Dalton Castle. Now, part of the reason why I'm scratching my head on this one is because it was announced last week that we'd be getting this match. They led up to it well. With that being the only match announced last week for this week, and it's a world title match, clearly this World TV title match should be the main event, right? The match itself, I thought, was pay-per-view quality. Easily the best match on the card. So I want to get two thoughts or ask two questions to you. Number one, your thoughts on this match. And number two, your thoughts on the placement of this match.
The match is great. Dalton Castle. I think I had mentioned this when we saw the pay-per-view in Philly.
Yes.
It was definitely like, he's my sense of humor. So I've become a fan. However, it's kind of, I'm not going to do another bad analogy. It's kind of one of those, it's a definition of insanity, because this happens on a regular basis as far as placement. And I think too, you had mentioned it before, as far as when you do it's one thing to pre-record an episode together. That's it. But what they're doing is they're pre-recording matches and then they're stringing it together, which is even harder to do. It's like almost playing playing Tetris and making sure that the blocks are all together and it makes sense. And sometimes it doesn't. As we saw a couple weeks ago when they were they filmed some stuff in Daly's place, and you're just like, all the way confused. So I think we both want the best for ROH, one, but I guess two, because we watch all the products and you watch way more products than I do, you see the gamut of everything. And it's just kind of like frustrating because ROH should be on this level and it's not quite making the cut, especially now since we're doing TNA and ROH. Yeah. It's not like the talent's not there. It's not like you can't formulate good storylines and all this stuff. Like even, you know, when you had Taya and Johnny come and Dalton's like, yeah, I'm done with you guys. Like that's, you know, that obviously that might be a callback to, you know, 6 weeks from now, and they're gonna go just on the comedic level. It's there. So I think the challenge is whoever is putting this together, taking all that stuff and making sense, and then also making it sense within the episode of placement. Yeah. So with that being said, I guess my roundabout way of saying that, yes, I definitely saw it was glaring, but they've done it before, and it's just kind of like, all right, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, by far, this should have been the main event. I mean, it's a television title match. We don't see very many title matches on Ring of Honor television. So it definitely, there should have been a lot of lead up where everything in this episode led to this match. It's unfortunate that didn't happen, because the other thing is, how do you follow a match like this that was so good? Because this match was literally something you'd see on Supercard of Honor. It was really, really good. Kyle Fletcher comes away with the win. Not fully sure what happens to Dalton Castle after this. A great match. Again, I just wanted the placement to be different, especially in light of the main event, which we'll get to. Following this, we had a tag team match. The Infantry back on our televisions. That's always good to see. Taking on the team of Nick Camarado and Jacoby Watts. There's a very interesting thread with this, which I will share after I get your thoughts on this match and the story told.
Man, Jacoby Watts. I don't know.
Isn't he?
Yeah, I don't know if you said it or if he's done an interview about it, but I've clearly missed it. How he got to this preacher man thing, very on point. But I kind of want to know who his inspiration was with that. But it's just, I think that's the good thing with having stuff like a TNA and a ROH. WWE can't necessarily do things like this, because it's just on such a bigger scale, and they have to cater to a wider audience, and mainstream media is a little bit more fickle. Whereas something like this, you know, if you grew up in the church, it's like it's,
you know what's happening here.
You know what's happening. So it's really, when I saw that last week, I was like, wait, what? What are we doing? So it's really good. So I'm just curious to see what's going to happen between the two of them. The Infantry, I mean, they have been making a play. Oops, sorry, I need to Kleenex. They've been making a play for. They've been looking good and strong for a long time. So anytime they show up on the screen is great. However, I kind of don't. I'm saying this, but I also don't want it to be one of those things like, you know, when there was a very distinct difference between NXT and the main roster, and you know, when you saw somebody doing great in NXT, you want them to go to main roster. This is what I'm going to do right now, which I hate when people do it, but I'm going to do it. I want to see them on AEW as far as how that's going to play out. I feel like there's so many strong characters on ROH that are deserving to be seen on, I guess, national television. that would make, really interesting stories. And I think the infantry is one of them. So
Yeah, I think for all of the challenges that Ring of Honor can at times have, I feel like the infantry is a set of stars that have been created in this iteration of Ring of Honor that we really can call stars. They got an opportunity a couple of months ago in in AEW as part of the tag team title tournament. They got a win over the House of Black, which was a really, really big moment, a marquee match against FTR. But the infantry, they are those guys. Now, here's the interesting piece of news that most wouldn't know. All four of these are uniquely connected because of their connection to the Nightmare Factory. Interestingly enough, the infantry, Carly Bravo and Jacoby Watts was the main event of the very first Nightmare Factory student showcase back end of 2020. So seeing them in this space, end of 2020, top of 2021. So, and I was there for that, which is crazy. Seeing them now on this stage kind of rekindle this kind of moment is really, really special and just speaks to just how far you can go in just a handful of years. So shout out to all four of these competitors. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with them going forward. Moving on, we see another proving ground match. This one between Billy Starks and Zamaya. Now, I was instantly drawn in by Zamaya because of her amazing look, which was clearly an ode to Bull Nakano. And I just was like, yeah, I want to see more of her. For sure. Again, a proving ground match. The rules of this is it's a 10-minute time limit. If the challenger lasts a full 10 minutes or gets the win somehow, they get an automatic title shot. In this case, Billy Starks ends up winning. What were your thoughts on this match and the presentation of Zamaya?
I believe Zamaya is a West Coast talent, and dang it, there's a promotion out here that I've seen her quite a few times. So I love when I see local to me talent make it. The proving ground, it kind of goes back to the whole thing when we were talking about with Maz. Like I definitely want wrestlers to have opportunities, right? However, it's just kind of one of those things where I don't know. I think it needs to be. I like the concept of it because they're stating exactly what's happening. This is a proving ground. This is somebody new, etc. But for them to do a proving ground with a title holder, that is just kind of like, yeah, I don't know. It's. I can't. There's something that's not clicking for me. However, going back to what I originally said, it's good for new talent to get the experience because it's not WWE doesn't do it as often as they used to anymore. So good for them, but again, storyline wise, I'm just kind of like, well, how does this help Billy? Because okay, so say she hits the 10 minutes, even if she does hit the 10 minutes and she does challenge for the championship, she's not going to get it. So
well, here and this I think is the problem with the proving ground match. There has to be more than one person who actually has won. Like we saw the infantry win a couple of months ago, which is great, but they are having so many proving ground matches right now. There has to be it's kind of like, now I think this is a better analogy. It's kind of like it's like Money in the Bank, right? Like when you win Money in the Bank, they almost always talk about leading into it the percentage of people who have cashed in successfully. Right. And so on the women's side, it's 100%. So you win Money in the Bank, you're a future women's champion. It's something like 85, 90% on the men's side, right? So you know that the likelihood of you becoming champion grows exponentially by winning this. Because being entered into a proving ground match doesn't really do much anymore because we've had so many proving ground matches since the match where the infantry won, which, newsflash, that was just end of March, top of April when they won that. So 2 months ago doesn't sound like a long time, but when on every show there are 2 or 3 proving ground matches, then it's lost its luster. You know, so winning the percentage of, 1 out of 20, that's 5%. That doesn't sound like something I want to engage in for an opportunity to win a championship.
Right.
So they're going to have to either put in stronger competitors to get these opportunities or make these proving ground matches fewer and farther between. So in other words, maybe you should have to earn a proving ground match, right? Like maybe it should be you've won 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 matches. Now you get a proving ground match. So we actually have some frame of reference to believe that it's still possible for you to win, because you got, as opposed to you just came in off, no offense, but you just came in off the street, right? You're unfamiliar to this group of people. So how are we going to say, yeah, you're the one to do it?
Right.
You know?
That's why, yeah, you should have like I said, kind of going back to that 6-week window where it's like you have maybe 2 or 3 wrestlers come in, and that's where they kind of circulate and kind of prove themselves for either, the battling to be that number 1 spot against now Queen Aminata. That's where the Maserati Queen Aminata match would be, because Maserati has now kind of gone through the proving ground for the number 1 contender. And that's kind of where it would work out. But yeah, I definitely agree with you, where it's just kind of like you're seeing this, and because Zamaya is a familiar face to me, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna watch. Just like Amir was a familiar face to the people in the audience.
Right.
But everybody else who's watching, I mean, I feel like anybody who has the ROH app is already a fan, regardless. So you
have to be. Absolutely.
Yeah. You're not going to be fickle where it's like, oh, I don't know this person, and shut it off. So maybe that's what they're banking on. I have no idea.
So we'll see. I hope that they're listening and they'll put together, I think, a proving grounds division of new competitors who get to compete against each other to earn the right to be in these kinds of matches. Now, what we would see is Red Velvet kind of show up at the end of this match and then attack Billy Starks. Queen Aminata kind of comes out, kind of wards off a couple of people until the referees finally come in and break this up. So it seems very clear we're leading to a Red Velvet Billy Starks match for the TV championship, which again, I imagine will probably happen at Death Before Dishonor. We get a backstage segment with Lee Johnson kind of talking about what's next for him, being interrupted by Kyle Fletcher. That leads to a challenge, 2 out of 3 falls match in the future at some point for the TV title. We don't know when. I guess my question to you about this one is, and it's kind of wild, Kyle Fletcher already said, I've already beaten you twice in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Why do I need to fight you again? Does that create interest in a 2 out of 3 falls match?
No. However, if during the match it leans towards Lee, then yes. But I don't see Fletcher dropping. So again, it kind of just goes back to it feels like, and maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like they have enough people in the locker room to really create meaningful storylines, even if they have to I mean, they all can't be long-winded, but it's just kind of one of those things where to answer your question, no, it didn't make me want to, like, oh, I want to see more of this, because you already stated that I beat you already. So what are we doing? So it'll be the onus will be on the producer and the writer to make this interesting, or it seems like a lot of stuff is just more time filling than anything else, which is not a good feeling. But again, who are we? We're just people who talk.
Just watch the product. That's all.
Just watch the product.
Well, that leads to the main event. The main event was a triple threat trios match. Say that 3 times fast. And at first I thought this was a mistake, but it's not. It's a triple threat trios match. Griff Garrison, Cole Carter, and Johnny TV. That's one trio. Against the Iron Savages with Jack Jameson. That's trio 2. Against the Dark Order. That's trio 3. This is your main event. And I think it's cool that the Dark Order were led to the ring by -1. We haven't seen him in a while, so that's pretty cool. The Dark Order gets the win on this one. What do you think about this triple threat trios match?
Honestly, I feel like the trios element really only worked on Lucha Underground. It's a hot take. You may or may not agree with me.
I need my applause on this one because that's a great take.
Like, I feel like, and I mean, obviously, there's some things that people are not as privy to. I know some things that happened, but I think we all know it kind of crashed and burned. But it was a really great product while it was there. But I feel like the trios tournament, the trios matches, you know, we try to do it because we want to include more people in the picture. However, you know, WoW just introduced it to, I think a month or two ago. It just doesn't hit like it did when Lucha Underground did it. I can't explain it. I don't know if it's because I believe Lucha Underground had one woman in the trios for each of them. So I don't know if there was that element. But yeah, the trios, it just seems like, and I get it, like Dark Order and Iron Savage, like they're legitimate trios. So right. I get that part. Right. However, it doesn't hit like it does. And I know obviously if you take the trios away and you only have the tag team, then you know it's less time for these individuals, which I definitely don't want, but there's just something missing. There's an element missing.
I think what you just said is absolutely brilliant. You're right. It worked best in Lucha Underground. And part of the reason I think it worked best in Lucha Underground is because it was authentic to Lucha Underground. It was very much a part of the Lucha culture. And so that's why that worked so well. I think AEW, in their attempt to kind of amalgamate elements from Mexico, elements from Japan, you know, they introduced this trios thing, which clearly was an ode to Lucha Underground, but it just doesn't hit the same. And I know Ring of Honor had the 6-man tag titles for a while, but again, it doesn't hit the same. I also think, and I want to be respectful, but I think the triple threat trios match, besides being a tongue twister, was just too much. It was too much. And they weren't fighting for anything. Like, they weren't fighting for a #1 contender. They weren't fighting for the titles. They were just fighting to fight. And again, I don't understand why that ended up being the main event over the World Television title match. But be that as it may, it was a great opportunity for all of them to get some face time. The Dark Order gets a win, which I think is cool. And I'll be intrigued to see if this leads to anything else. So a supersized edition of our Thursday Night Roundup. But hey, it's a lot of ground to cover. TNA's Impact, the 20th anniversary, episode 67 of Ring of Honor. You can check out all things Ring of Honor on their streaming platform. And that, of course, is Honor Club at watchroh.com. Or you can check that app out in the app store of your choice. Of course, TNA Plus, you can check out at TNAwrestling.com or by downloading the TNA Plus app in all of the spaces. This is the Thursday Night Roundup. I think we did pretty good for our first Thursday Night Roundup. Two full shows. Pretty good.
I mean, yeah, there's more shows are coming. There's some original programming from WWT coming. Like I said, we're going to be announcing our official sponsor for WWT on Monday, which we're truly excited about. So yeah, some good things. The staff is going to be all over the world in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, we're going to be it's going to be fun times. The
Mhm.
summer is going to be quite busy, and oh, what a time to be alive and
Oh,
be a
yes.
wrestling fan.
Absolutely. All right. Well, for those who have not been familiar with how to find me, you can find me at Bonafide across all of the social spaces. You can check out my commentary work in all of these spaces as well. IWE, Southern Honor Wrestling, All Caribbean Wrestling, some cool things coming up. Ashe Wrestling, cool things coming up.
Oh
Also,
man,
big
Ashe. Woo-hoo! That's gonna be good.
guys, oh my God, that's going to be so good. Big show with Southern Honor happening tonight. The month of June for me is going to be jam-packed with Southern Honor, Ashe, All Caribbean. It's going to be amazing. So make sure you're following me at Bonafide on all of the spaces. And of course, you can check me out here at Women's Wrestling Talk.
We can also check out. Do you have the intro, by the way? Or you?
I do.
Okay, perfect.
I got it.
You can also check out this afternoon. WWT Live is happening. We also have our SmackDown watch along. We also going to be doing our PLE for NXT happening on Sunday. Also tomorrow, WoW is our WoW post show is happening as well. It's going to be a double header. So a lot of things happening in the next 3 days. So be on the lookout for that. Other than that, you can follow me everywhere at TK Trinidad. You can follow Women's Wrestling Talk everywhere at wwtalkpod.com. And be sure to look out for I was gonna say the professor, but not the professor. Is the prime minister? What is he again? The mayor. Please be on the lookout for the mayor this Sunday. I don't know, give him a pat on the back or I don't know, something. But other than that, thank you guys so much for rocking with Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet.
Thanks for joining WWT. Don't forget to like us on all social media platforms at wwtalkpod. Like and subscribe on all video and audio platforms like yesterday, my G. And check out our website at wwtalkpod.com. Thanks for watching Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling network on the planet.